let's get started like we always do on the first look, and that's with the main event of the evening. We're going to take a look at this main event, and like I mentioned, it's going down in the women's flyweight division. Thug Rose Namajunas 12-6 as a professional, taking on Tracy Cortez 11-1. So obviously you've got Rose Namajunas, more experience. We could start there, right? Higher level experience. She's been fighting in the UFC for a very long time. She's been a little bit more active than Tracy Cortez as well. Cortez only has 5 fights with the promotion. Meanwhile, Rose Namajunas has tripled her up in that regard at 32 years of age. It's not like she's ancient. It's not like she's an old woman. However, is she a young, hungry, scrappy contender in the same way? That's a lot harder to say, right? Obviously, changing weight classes, that's something we see a lot of fighters do later on in their career. But I think one thing I've noted about Rose Namajunas is she does look to have the size to compete at 125. It doesn't look like she's totally outgunned in there physically. However, Manon Fiorot, who is one of the most physical flyweights in the division, was clearly much more physical than she was. And the other criticism, if I had any to levy towards Rose Namajunas in these recent flyweight fights, it does look like she's carrying a little thin layer of body fat. And I don't mean that to be disparaging or to judge anybody's appearance, but just talking about, when you have a body composition for athletics, obviously making straw weight is a serious commitment for Rose Namajunas. She has to change her body composition in order to get down there. She has to shrink herself, right? And that gets harder to do as you get older. So I think that for Rose, it makes sense that we're seeing her at 125 pounds as she gets a little bit longer into her career. But does that, necessarily serve her body's interest the best for fighting? I'm not sure that it does. The thing that's impressive to me is I went back through the stats to try and get a better feel for Rose Namajunas and how she's dealt with wrestling and grappling, because I do think that Tracy Cortez, despite her last fight, showing out on the feet a little bit against Jasmine Jasudavicius, most of what she offers in her fight so far has been takedown, control-heavy approach. She tries to get on top of women. She tries to threaten with submissions. And when you're looking at Rose Namajunas, she's done a phenomenal job, especially recently in her career, of being the person that gets control. If anybody gets controlled in a Rose Namajunas fight, it tends to be her opponents. You look back, I think Carla Esparza was able to get 4 or 5 minutes of control and submit her. That was a long time ago, right? And since then, I'm going to pull it up because I sent these numbers in the chat over on Patreon earlier. But it did stand out to me as something that was really, something impressive from Rose Namajunas, right? And I've come on here and criticized Rose in the past. I bet Carla Esparza in the rematch as well, hugely. And that was a nothing burger of a fight. Nothing happened there. I won't pretend that was some marvelous read. It was just a fight where I thought the odds should have been closer. They obviously should have been closer. Nothing happened in 25 minutes. But in any case, right, let's go through Namajunas control time for and against, because I sent this earlier. Namajunas 7 minutes for and 2 minutes against Amanda Ribas. Now, Amanda Ribas is a 115-pound fighter. I think that's where she shines. I think that's her best work. But for her, it's a big imperative to cut down all that weight to 115. When Amanda cuts all that weight, her ability to take a punch is severely diminished. So her chin isn't that great altogether. And when you cut extra weight, when you bring Amanda down to 115, it makes her very vulnerable to being clipped on the chin, to being knocked out. And so at 125, she was able to take the damage a little bit better. She was able to exchange better with Rose. She was able to land some shots on the feet. But I did think that we, also saw Amanda was just not physically able to dominate Rose. And she was able to get to a couple good positions. She was able to attempt some submissions even along the way. But what we didn't see from Amanda Ribas is a really committed, grappling heavy approach. She wanted to strike, and it was Rose Namajunas who ended up coming out with more control time there. 7 minutes for 7 minutes of control time against Zhang Weili. Zhang Weili is known for being physical, for dominating these fights in the women's strawweight division. And it is hard to make it an apples to orange comparison because it was at strawweight. But Zhang Weili is known for being a control-heavy grappler, for getting on top of these women, for being too strong, too savvy. And Rose Namajunas was able to win those grappling exchanges, broadly speaking. She's able to get to the top position oftentimes. It's pretty impressive stuff. 4 minutes of control time for, 1 minute against Waterson Gomez. I kind of throw that out of the sample. I think Waterson Gomez would get taken for her paper by Tracy Cortez at this stage of the game. And then 2 minutes for, 2 minutes against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. So basically the last time that she went even with somebody on grappling metrics was Karolina Kowalkiewicz. And when you look at that fight, you know, Carolina was able to get the win. It was a close decision. And I think that that was kind of a turning point for Rose. She's had an ability to grapple from early on in her career. If you look back, Rose was able to get flying arm bars, rear naked chokes. She's gotten a few of these submissions on her resume, but she sort of turned away from that portion of her game and made it more focused on boxing and wrestling. Right. So she'll still throw the kick. She'll still try and, use her striking at distance. But a lot of times what Rose Namajunas is attempting to do is either defend a takedown, use her own takedown to get on top, or land strikes on the feet at distance. So this seems to me like a difficult fight for Tracy Cortez in some ways, right? For me, it's predicated on the takedown. If Tracy Cortez is able to get takedowns early and often in this fight, she's probably going to have a lot of success because we haven't seen Rose put in those dangerous positions lately. But when she has been put in suboptimal positions, things have gone very sideways for her at times in the past. I even think back to the Jillian Robertson grappling match that she had. That was basically a foregone conclusion, right? And Jillian Robertson, a little bit of a tweener in her own right between 115, 125 pounds. So shout out to Dixon. He just brought that up in the comments, and I was mentioning it myself. Did you ever see the BJJ match between Robertson and Rose? Absolutely. And so the things that happen here for me when I start to conceptualize this fight is, number one, I think we're going to be grappling a lot in this fight more often than not. And the reason I feel that way is Tracy Cortez tends to push the wrestling and the grappling. Last time out, she's got Jasmine Jasudavicius, who's a big girl, strong at 125 pounds, wants to wrestle, wants to grapple, doesn't have very good striking defense. So when you have that kind of opponent in front of you, you're going to want to strike with them, right? And when Tracy Cortez was out there striking, she was having a lot of success against Jasudavicius in the wrestling and the grappling. The physicality actually gave her some issues. She was getting taken down. She was getting put in some suboptimal positions in the second round. So when I'm looking at their footage, I'm impressed broadly by Tracy Cortez, but she's not a proven finisher. And when you have a 5-round fight scheduled and it's at altitude and you weren't preparing for it, and it's against the best opponent of your career, there does start to be a number of things working against her in this matchup, right? I think that Tracy Cortez is very solid. She's on an 11-fight win streak. She beat Erin Blanchfield. Very close, very competitive decision. And the thing that's hard to come away from that fight and say, she looked like head and shoulders above Blanchfield. She did not. But she was able to compete position for position. She was in a deep armbar for about 4 minutes, didn't give up, didn't tap, didn't make any mistakes, stayed calm, stayed positionally sound. And when she got submitted in her first ever, pro fight, a lot of fighters can get derailed by that early loss. She's been able to work through that, right? She's been in a bunch of deep submission attempts since then. She's been able to survive and work through it. I think that Tracy Cortez makes more mistakes than Rose Namajunas, just broadly speaking. But she's also aggressive. She's also tenacious. She also does a lot. Right? When she's out there, she's attempting strikes. She's attempting takedowns. She's trying to make somebody fight her for the entire time. And I've seen her take a lot of clean punches right to the chin and just keep on tanking forward, keep showing that will, that resolve. So I think that for Rose Namajunas, she hasn't finished a fight in some time. Let me go back and look at the record. So we pulled up Rose's Tapology here. The last time she finished a fight was when she head kicked Zhang Wei Li back in 2021. I would say that she has the most chance to win a fight by knockout that she's had in some time here. And it's just because when you look at Manon Fiorot, she's a dedicated striker, right? She's very defensively responsible. The only real damage that Rose was able to create in that fight was a clash of heads, right? Where Manon started bleeding like a stuck pig out the side of her head. Then when you look at, what we've seen from her other fights, right? She rematched Zhang Wei Li. She did not seem like she was close to finishing that fight. It was a competitive decision. She was able to get the win. I thought that Zhang Wei Li won that fight. Then when you look at the Manon Fiorot fight, she breaks her finger in the first round, and her corner tried to get her back on track. They tried to refocus her, and it was hard for them to do. She was on enemy soil. She's taken on a tough opponent, and it just didn't go her way, right? She gets an early injury, but she did try and battle her way back. I thought she looked, solid enough in the third round there. Then you look at the Amanda Hebos fight. And I really think that Amanda kind of blew that fight. She made a lot of bad decisions in that fight, trying to force the grappling at times when it wasn't there, when she was landing pretty well on the feet. And that does make me think to myself, if Tracy Cortez is tough, durable, doesn't get hurt in this fight, doesn't make a catastrophic decision, I do think that this is going to be very close on the cards. When you look at what Tracy was able to do in her last fight, I did think it was impressive the amount of output that we saw from her. So I'm pulling back up the results, right? Tracy's last fight, she landed 103 significant strikes. And that's particularly impressive to me because she got controlled for 3 minutes by Jasmine Jasudavicius. So she was getting taken down and controlled for most of the second round. She was still able to land 100 plus significant strikes. And Jasmine also cheated in that fight. If you guys go back and watch, like she has braids, right? Her hair is braided up. Jasmine grabs it and just knees her in the head, kicks her in the head, like a couple fouls in a row. And Tracy like stops what she's doing, like gives her a lecture for it, and then goes back to striking. So she's the kind of girl that is not afraid to get into a gritty fight. But I do think that she's defensively liable. I do think that Rose is going to have opportunities to hit her clean, to land big, impactful strikes, and especially if she's not getting takedowns. So the things that kind of stood out to me when I was just looking over the prop market here, the fight not to go the distance. Every women's main event seems to go the distance. But when you're just looking at how these two women match up, number one, altitude is a factor. Tracy Cortez never been 5 rounds. She's been scheduled 5 rounds 0 times in her career. I went back and looked. You have a natural flyweight here in Tracy Cortez, who's never fought below flyweight, as best I could tell from her topology. I think she's even fought as high as 135 pounds. And meanwhile, Rose is a former strawweight fighter. So you've got an interesting weight dynamic there. You've got 2 women that have both lost via submission before in their career. And for, Tracy Cortez, obviously it was her pro debut, but it is something where it's not like she hasn't been in difficult grappling situations since then, right? Melissa Gatto took her back. She's had a couple moments of lapse, vulnerability. Erin Blanchfield almost took her arm home with her as well. So very solid opponents. I'm not taking anything away from her there. And when you look at the people that she's defeated, many of them have solid records, but she just doesn't have the same kind of longevity, the same kind of testing that Rose has had in the promotion. So I don't feel great about a side here. If I had to make a, approximate line based on where I'm at right now, I would probably make Rose a deserved favorite, but I would probably put her at about a -150 here, based on her championship and 5-round experience, based on her ability to be dangerous in all positions. The fact that it's in Colorado, home match for Rose Namajunas, I think all of that is helpful for her. However, I don't think Tracy Cortez is dead letter here. I think if she's getting takedowns, she could be a real problem for Rose Namajunas. She keeps a high pace rate and pressure on her opponents in fights. And when we've seen Rose break in the past, that's typically been, part of the puzzle, right? Getting on her, staying in her face, keeping pressure on. And for all the credit that you want to give Rose for her 5-round experience, which she does deserve, we've also seen fights where the 3-round fight with Jessica Andrade, everything was going sideways for her in that 3rd round. She had the round of her life against Jessica Andrade, when she got knocked out and slammed on her head as well. So I just think that we've seen, layers of both of these fighters that could challenge the other. And so Rose is a little bit more proven. She's not an old woman by any means. She's young. She still has a lot of experience. She's very marketable in her own right. Both of these women, very marketable. But I have to feel like, Rose is the more popular known name, right? She's got a lot of experience. She is a household UFC name. The thing is, though, as a favorite, she hasn't really given you that return on investment. One thing about Rose, she's been underrated her whole career, right? When she's been an underdog, she's produced over and over and over again. She's just blown people out of the water in that underdog position. But when people start to get too bullish on Rose, that's when things start to go sideways. Carla Esparza, that's an example that comes to mind. Did Carla Esparza, guys, earn that win, right? Did Carla Esparza do something special? Did she go out there and show a new layer to her game? None of those things happened. She just was there. They both did nothing, and the fight was over. They had to raise somebody's hand. They raised Carla Esparza's hand. So that's the thing that keeps me off laying chalk with somebody like Rose Namajunas, right? She's a good fighter at her best. At home in Denver, maybe we see just a flashback to her championship level performances. But for me, what I don't want to do is get caught over my skis, right? Getting too excited about Rose, because that historically has been where she's been a letdown. To her fans and to her backers, right? Is when everybody is all gung ho on Rose. So shout out to Rose. She did win last time in a similar price range against Amanda Hebos, and I picked against her there. So, still feeling the sting of that one, guys. But I think for me, right now, I'm going to lean ever so slightly to Rose Namajunas. But I think there could be some value on the ends by sub on the fight not to go the distance. Those are a couple of the ways I'm thinking about this. So good fight, good scrap, and I'll do a little bit more tape, a little bit more due diligence. I think that Tracy has a path in the grappling, but I just think that if she's not able to get takedowns, she's probably a little bit more open on the feet. Although I wasn't blown away by Rose's striking in her last fight. Wow, that's interesting. Cole says, I was watching Helwani the other day. Tracy talked about being in a fairly bad vehicle accident. Don't love to hear that. Yeah, I also don't love to hear that. Tracy over 30, isn't she? Yes, she is over 30. I think she just turned 30. She is the younger party in this fight. No, she's approaching 31. So about halfway to 31. So yeah, it's an interesting fight. And both these women could use a big win. I think the division could use a new contender. So in that way, I think Tracy Cortez winning would be good for the sport and the division. But Rose Namajunas may not go softly into that good night. She's proven that she's been one of the toughest outs in recent years for WMMA. And even though I wasn't blown away by her last performance, she went out there and earned another win. She did it in this division at 125 pounds. She did it over 5 rounds. And Tracy Cortez just hasn't had a chance to prove that yet. So I think her cardio has looked all right, but I do think her cardio has shown, some instances where she's flagging off a little bit towards the end of that third round. And if that's the case, it's going to be difficult to compete over 5 at elevation.